This young man was destined to become the face of the UFC. He combines brutal knockouts with pole dancing, skateboarding, DJing, and acting. Since Conor McGregor, we haven't seen such a unique fighter. That's why the UFC management and fans expected to see a championship belt around Payton Talbott's waist within a year. However, one Brazilian veteran decided to crush the UFC's hopes. Despite the arena and commentators rooting for the young prospect, it didn't faze the seasoned veteran Raoni Barcelos, who completely dominated him. But how did this happen? Why did one of the most exciting fighters in MMA lose so badly? Veteran Raoni Barcelos, unsurprisingly, came prepared to grapple with the striker, Talbott, who once famously said that his favorite grappling move is the one that gets me back to my feet. Clearly hadn't spent enough time practicing how to actually return to his feet. From the opening moments of the fight, Barcelos caught Talbott's very first kick and went for a takedown. What initially seemed like a minor misstep soon revealed itself to be a major issue for Talbott. He began the fight in an unusually high stance, reminiscent of BJ Penn during his infamous losing streak, which made defending takedowns even harder. Everyone knew Barcelos would aim to grapple, and yet Talbott's overly confident approach backfired. Barcelos quickly closed the distance, caught Talbott's leg, and despite struggling initially, drove him to the fence and tied him up in the clinch. Talbott's athleticism helped him maintain balance on one leg, but the writing was on the wall. When Barcelos dropped lower to secure the takedown, Talbott briefly locked onto his neck, attempting a guillotine choke. However, Barcelos expertly countered, reversed the position, and landed inside control. He used his leg to trap Talbott's, eliminating any chance of creating a base to escape. Talbott used the cage to scramble back to his feet, but Barcelos immediately pressured him against the fence and climbed onto his back. Instead of rushing for a submission or unloading strikes, Barcelos took his time, methodically wearing Talbott down. It was a Brazilian masterclass in Dagestani-style MMA wrestling. Barcelos repeatedly allowed Talbott to stand, only to take him down again, draining his energy with every sequence. By the third minute of the fight, Talbott was already glancing at the clock, a clear sign of frustration and exhaustion. Fatigue quickly affected Talbott's focus, and Barcelos capitalized by locking in a choke. To his credit, Talbott immediately started working to break the grip. Once he escaped the choke, Barcelos grabbed his lower arm to remove Talbott's only base of support. Barcelos attempted another choke, but when it didn't succeed, he dragged Talbott back to the fence and tried to secure an arm triangle. Talbott showed awareness by using his legs to maintain half guard, preventing Barcelos from advancing. For the rest of the round, Talbott was in survival mode. While his defensive skills were commendable, he couldn't transition back to offense, a critical flaw. In the second round, Talbott adjusted slightly, starting with a jab instead of a kick. However, his stance was still too high, leaving him vulnerable. After throwing a feint jab followed by a real one, Talbott managed to freeze Barcelos near the cage and land an overhand. However, Barcelos quickly tested Talbott's reflexes with a feint for a takedown, which Talbott reacted to visibly and dramatically.
Oh, hell no, man.
Payton showed good timing as soon as Barcelos prepared to throw a kick. He immediately countered with a clean 1-2 combination. Barcelos then faked a deep takedown attempt, and Talbott reacted instantly, clearly preoccupied with defending grappling exchanges. Gaining confidence, Payton made a critical mistake. He threw another jab feint, likely intending to follow with an overhand as he pressed forward aggressively. Barcelos capitalized on this by executing a counter takedown. After being taken down, Payton worked hard to transition into butterfly guard, a position where the opponent essentially rests on their knees, making it easier to return to standing. Considering Talbott's favorite grappling move is the one that helps him get back to his feet, it's no surprise he relied on this technique. However, it didn't work on the first attempt. When Payton finally managed to stand, Barcelos maintained control of his head, allowing him to land a knee as Talbott exited the clinch. Barcelos immediately attempted another takedown, but this time Talbott defended successfully. Still, upon returning to his feet, it became evident that he was breathing heavily and his punches lost their sharpness. His combination started to feel labored and slow. The slower pace affected his defense as well. Barcelos, despite his age, landed an easy jab followed by a spectacular takedown. He transitioned straight into side control, and as Payton seemingly paused to catch his breath, Barcelos moved into mount. However, Talbott once again showcased impressive leg work, using his feet to escape and return to standing. Unfortunately, he left his neck exposed, and Barcelos punished him with a knee to the body this time. When Talbott got back up again, he looked exhausted. His hands were low, his breathing labored, and his composure was gone. This left him open to a spinning back fist, reminiscent of Ben Askren's struggles. Although he tried to counter and hit Barcelos, fatigue had wrecked his coordination, and all his strikes missed. Worse yet, Talbott appeared mentally defeated. In previous fights, he excelled at cutting off his opponent's movement and forcing exchanges, but now he simply followed Barcelos around, missing wildly. After absorbing a few punches, it seemed Barcelos decided that Payton no longer had the power to hurt him. He began trading confidently. Barcelos initiated exchanges, and his punches had a visible effect, unlike Talbott's. Payton has never shied away from brawls, but his hope to catch Barcelos in a trade worked against him this time. Barcelos even started to evade Talbott's strikes with ease. At one point, Barcelos faked another takedown attempt. Talbott reacted, but this was a setup for a follow-up combination. Barcelos repeated the takedown motion, but transitioned into a knee aimed at Payton's head. Talbott didn't lower himself enough for the knee to connect cleanly, but ended up eating several follow-up punches instead. From that moment, Barcelos started landing nearly everything. It briefly seemed like Talbott might turn the tide as his strikes began connecting too, indicating that Barcelos was also tiring. It felt like the young prospect was about to take over the fight. However, Barcelos blatantly grabbed Payton's leg, lifted it, and spun him to the ground. While Barcelos didn't do much damage on the ground, this takedown left no doubt in the judges' minds that the second round also belonged to the veteran. Each round, Payton started stronger, and the third round was no exception. He came out energized, landing solid combinations. When Barcelos attempted a takedown, Talbott reversed it with a skillful trip. He then drove Barcelos toward the cage and began working on ground and pound. Jaime Barcelos nearly locked in an omoplata submission. However, to fully secure the hold, he used the fence, prompting the referee to step in and nullify the submission attempt. The referee then gave Talbott the choice to restart the fight either on the feet or on the ground. Surprisingly, Payton opted to continue on the ground. At this moment, it became clear that Talbott wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to avoid being finished. Despite Payton's willingness to remain on the ground, Barcelos managed to push off with his legs during an active ground and pound exchange and returned to his feet. Once standing, Hani unexpectedly started landing clean strikes on Talbott. These exchanges seemed to ignite a second wind in Payton, who attempted a flying knee. However, this reckless move was immediately punished with a takedown. A quick scramble followed, and both fighters returned to their feet. In the clinch, Talbott landed a few solid shots to Barcelos' body, but as soon as they broke apart, his exhaustion became painfully obvious. He moved around the octagon as if he were walking his dog in the park, slow and disorganized. First, he backed away from Barcelos at a snail's pace, then aimlessly followed him and walked straight into an overhand punch to the jaw. Despite the crowd and commentators openly rooting for the young prospect, Barcelos, seemingly invigorated, secured yet another takedown. Near the fence, Haney dominated Talbott from every position, effortlessly controlling him. While Payton lay there waiting for the fight to end, the commentators began spinning the narrative, calling this the best possible loss Talbott could have experienced. Joe Rogan, in particular, gradually convinced the audience that this was, indeed, a valuable learning experience, while Barcelos mercilessly pounded the helpless prospect on the ground. In the end, the UFC's next big star was decisively beaten, and it wasn't a lucky victory for Barcelos. It was a technical dismantling. This was nothing short of a humiliation. So, what do you think? Can Payton Talbott reinvent himself and still become a UFC champion? This fight exposed his tactical arrogance, starting the bout with a high stance against a wrestler and only adapting too late. His mindset, particularly in the third round, also raises questions. He appeared more focused on losing safely than finding ways to win. What was once seen as his strength, his laid-back attitude and interest in other hobbies, now looks like a liability. Perhaps Payton needs to spend more time in the gym. The issues weren't limited to his grappling. His pace, footwork, and overall conditioning were alarmingly poor. This is a division where Merab Dvalishvili is the champion. Imagine what someone like that would do to Talbott. If Payton wants to be a top MMA fighter, he needs to work harder. He must improve his grappling defense, fight pace, and overall focus. Do you think his potential overstated?